This is Anita Alexandra, and welcome to 5-Element Personality Paradigms, Navigating Relationships. In this podcast, I will be exploring the emotional dynamics of hatred. What is hatred? How is it seated in an individual or a group? How is it rooted out? Is it innate, learned, or is it a corrupted 5-element personality expression? Hatred is a deep-seated emotion that we experience when we feel that someone or something is a threat to our happiness, success, and well-being. The feelings of hatred prompt us to move away from or avoid people or things that we believe can harm us, that can cause us pain. Sometimes the fear is real, based on experience. Sometimes we learn it from others, and sometimes it is only a reaction to a perceived threat. Hatred can be fueled by anger, frustration, fear, loss, resentment, jealousy, insecurity, and intolerance. When we look at these motivations through a 5-element lens, we find anger and frustration primarily in the wood element, fear in water, loss, jealousy, and resentment in metal, insecurity in earth and fire, and intolerance, which can spring forth from any elemental personality as an expression of resistance and mistrust toward that which is not like oneself. Hatred in action is sometimes an attempt to protect us from our own feelings of helplessness, powerlessness, shame, inadequacy, and injustice. Hatred can also come from a fear that we are like that which we despise. With a background in hypnotherapy, I find the experience of people hating someone they don't even know of particular interest. The subconscious mind believes that similar objects or people are the same. If someone has the traits of someone you hated at some point in your life, or remind you of someone who harmed you or belittled you in some way, you might find yourself hating a person who shares those traits in appearance or manner without even understanding why. The hatred we are currently witnessing through racial injustices has its foundations in oppression, a feeling of powerlessness against a circumstance, individual, or group. In an exploration of how hatred might look through each of the elements, the most likely 5-element expression of hatred is anger in the form of aggression or violence as found in the wood element. Wood is a leader, so Earth might follow this example with a follow the crowd response, even though it would not gravitate toward this response on its own. In this situation, hatred might push forward the persuasive, rhetorical attributes found in the metal personality, or incite the passionate fire personality to participate in violence when they would much prefer joyful expression in their lives. Anger, when acknowledged, can bring awareness to us and prompt us to action and solution-oriented behavior, because it often comes with courage and the ability to push against an oppressor or an oppressing situation. But if one allows anger to take over as a primary emotion without a purposeful direction, then it can become destructive to the individual or to others that bear the brunt of this indiscriminate rage. The healthy wood personality will use anger as an impetus to motivate them to action. It will give them courage to speak out against the situation, and in the best of expressions, it will strategize, develop, and build a platform that creates positive change in the world. That doesn't mean that it will always be a peaceful expression. As we have experienced in the past, wood with fire escalates situations, and that turns anger to rage and irrational behaviors without consideration for the consequences of one's actions. The wood personality will tear down statues, burn buildings, loot, and even take up firearms against people or institutions to be heard and acknowledged in their suffering, to force change. We cannot condone such behavior, nor can we justify it as entirely wrong or unfounded. Dramatic changes to a society often occur through violent rebellion and an act of war. For this task, we turn to the wood personality. As a leader, strategist, and action-oriented personality, it is essential in getting the ball of dramatic change rolling. Once in play, then we are able to see the other personalities more clearly and how they can support wood in this initial action. Fire is passionate by nature and will be more impetuous and riled up going into spontaneous action that could have unforeseen consequences down the road, consequences that might even negate some of the good intentions behind their motivations for change. Fire is the joyful personality, but it also likes to be entertained and entertaining, so it can be motivated toward participating in the extreme emotional states and drama of the situation. The metal personality has a huge role to play in the fight against depression, as a sense of fairness and equity and justice is the core of its value system. It will participate in the plan laid out by Wood, but destructive, rash, and irrational behaviors go against its sense of order and intelligence and interferes with its clear thinking regarding solutions and the time it takes to make change at a systematic legal level. It will take all factors into account and fight the good fight from a more intellectual position armed with the law and constitutional rights and due process. Metal's objectivity might actually be the single most important ingredient in the fight against legal injustice because it doesn't innately discern color or entitlement or privilege or status or money. It sees justice as a less personal, more abstract concept, and it sticks to the facts and defers to law. The primary emotion of the metal personality is sorrow, even if it isn't apparent in their intellectual approach to life, so there will be plenty of silent, invisible tears shed over the behaviors and injustices surrounding oppression. The earth personality is the mediator and the protector of family, community, and traditional values. So where it will fall in this battle against oppression will depend on what traditional values and conditioned behaviors were taught to them since birth and how much exposure and experience it has had in the world to temper them. It won't like cruelty or violence. It is of a more peace-loving approach to life. It doesn't like conflict, so it will have to be a more personal threat to motivate them to social change, challenging the status quo or going against any established system. However, they are loyal and once engaged will hold steady, supportive, reliable ground for the cause they have joined. Worry is the emotional tendency of the earth personality. So whether they take action or not, they will worry about everyone involved in the conflict and especially for their own sense of safety and security. The water personality is going to feel this plight of the oppressed significantly. It has an innate sense of caring for humanity as a whole and doesn't distinguish between the petty and arbitrary boundaries imposed by others. It will be prone to take the high road in a conflict, but will hold ground over values using their more clever and less aggressive approaches to problem solving. Water moves and changes course, so it will be seeing the issues from many different angles and perspectives. Patience is its strong suit, so action will be well thought out and considered. It will see the need for cooperation from the whole and give sound counsel regarding many different perspectives on the issues. Fear is the primary emotion of the water personality, but something of this magnitude that affects so many will pull them out of the deep recesses of their self-protection in order to have a voice and take courageous action in the world. Hatred must be learned, but it can also be passed down from one generation to another like a legacy. As illnesses go, hatred is a state of disease. It is like a virus, obvious or covert, destructive in its infectious intensity for all to see, or hidden and waiting for an opportunity to arise that will allow it to rear its insidious nature and attempt to take over. For the defense against hatred, we must be cautious, alert, and prepared to recognize the symptoms and catch them early in others and ourselves to avoid a full-blown outbreak of devastating consequences that we haven't seen so widespread in this country since the death of Martin Luther King Jr. in the 60s. That was over 50 years ago, a half of a century, and this is where we are. It is tragic, and it is our current opportunity for purging the putrid waters of hatred from our psyches and from our hearts. It doesn't really matter where the biases came from or how deeply they have been entrenched in any of us. They must be examined and worked through, even if that means therapeutic intervention to acknowledge the inalienable rights of others and ourselves and our United States of America constitutional right, not a guarantee, but the pursuit of happiness. It takes education, awareness, and exploration of our feelings of hatred and all biases to empower an individual to choice and appropriate action. Compassion is a feeling which motivates one to action in alleviating the suffering of another, and so might be the most valuable counteraction to hatred. This will be found most prevalently in the fire, earth, and water personalities. We are all vulnerable to our humanness and programmed demise. This commonality links us all at survival levels. Embracing that shared fact with a goal towards understanding and compassion is what can ultimately bring us into experiencing what was once threatening as something that we find solutions for living with in peace and acceptance. For education on tolerance or to report hate crimes, visit www.splcenter.org. For more information regarding the 5 elements in personality assessment and how to navigate relationships in your life, please visit www.architectinhealth.com. Thanks for listening.